do we want to start with Amos Miller? What's going on in Pennsylvania? And you had it's a week and a half that you had up there, but you had an amazing week that didn't end with an amazing ruling from the Pennsylvania Court of Appeal. So let everybody know what happened there.
This one was the trial court, the Court of Common Pleas, as it's called there in Pennsylvania. They got a lot of weird names for courts up there. They got like a Commonwealth Court. They got a Superior Court. That's the appeals court. They got, traditional Supreme Court. That's actually their Supreme Court, unlike New York, where the Supreme Court is the trial court. They got magisterial courts. They got, all kinds of courts up there. So, they can't get enough of them, apparently. But, yeah, we can start with Amos Miller.
Okay, let's do it. So, so what I thought it was the appeal because I thought you were reviewing the injunction that the state had gotten.
It was with the same judge. So the judge, they don't have temporary restraining orders in Pennsylvania. They just have preliminary injunctions. And so he had issued a preliminary injunction back in January, which was a complete prohibition on the production, the possession, the distribution, purchase, sale of anything raw milk related. And they were initially seeking an injunction on all of his food to prohibit him from being to do any farming of any kind at all, from being able to distribute any food, sell any food, make any food, possess any food. And the way they had been enforcing that is they had been rationing food to himself. As they came in and said, here's your rations for your own family today, that you can eat this much and you can feed your children this much. But no more, and telling him what he could feed his own animals, including his own pigs. So they had gone full commie there at the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture.
The initial issue was that he was allegedly or selling milk products without Pennsylvania certification, authorization.
Well, it was several different claims that they made. The lawsuit claims that he has to have all these permits or he can't sell food at all. There's arguments about that. But their initial predicate to the public and to the court was that the food, and this is actually what the law is supposed to require, which is that the only food that can be destroyed is food that is unfit for human consumption and can't be made amenable for human consumption, and that there is no other beneficial or animal use of that food. That's the legal standard for under Pennsylvania law. So they initially obtained the injunction by saying that they were worried that his food was somehow unsafe.
Now, if I can stop you there, the injunction is it like a provisional, like an emergency injunction until a hearing on the interlocutory? Correct. They have to go in with some. I mean, it's damn compelling evidence. Whatever, and this was ex parte that they did this originally?
Yeah, they did it ex parte initially, even though they knew I was present in the state. They went and got it ex parte. And for those people that don't know what that is, that means you don't even know it exists. That the injunction is issued without you getting a chance to present your side of the case. So the hearing was scheduled to see whether or not so that we could present our side. And at the time they were doing this, they used the same trick they've done for years. And the gullible press and limited politicians in Pennsylvania have always bought this up. That they just eat it and swallow whole. That basically most of the press in Pennsylvania are stenographers for the state. I don't even know why they call themselves journalists. All they do is write down whatever the state tells them to. And most of the dim-witted politicians in the state, including most of the so-called Republican conservatives in the state, eat it up as well. That's why Pennsylvania is in such shoddy condition politically at the moment. That's what made that book kind of apt and appropriate for tonight's discussion. The past storyline with Amos had always been a combination of somehow his food was dangerous and somebody somehow somewhere got sick from it. And that he just won't abide any rules, and that's the reason why that there's any kind of problem, and that the government just wants to help him. That the government's here and they just want to help you.
But I got to highlight the ex parte. It doesn't just mean not represented by counsel. It means it's such an emergency they can't notify the defendant because he might destroy evidence. He might try to abscond. He might try to fire sale all of it off. I don't even understand how they get to that threshold in this case.
Correct. And so what the hearing was, as the judge himself said, if the case was solely about having a permit, he goes, we don't need a hearing. That's a separate matter. He goes, well, why are we holding a long, extensive hearing, multi-hour, part of a whole day? It was scheduled for another day if necessary. If that was just the issue, of course, that wasn't just the issue. The issue that they were supposed to have to prove is that the food was unfit and unsafe. The problem they had is at the hearing, and none of that went their way. So what came out at the hearing was that no one has ever complained to the state of Pennsylvania in the 20-year history of Amos Miller operating a farm and distributing his products all across the country, tens of millions of products to tens of thousands of Americans over 20 years. No one has ever complained to any government ever anywhere about Amos Miller's food, that they were deceived by it, that they got sick by it. Never. And that none of his food had ever been ordered recalled, ever, after an investigation. That is one of the best safety records for food of any farmer or any farm processor or food processor of any kind, any restaurant, you name it, anywhere in the state of Pennsylvania, or quite frankly, the entire country. Everybody, 1 out of 5 Americans get sick every year from food. The probability that your food is so safe that nobody has ever complained a single time is extraordinary. Not only that, the sworn testimony came in that the person they had previously claimed some years ago, and you still see these false statements made in social media and the press, that he had caused someone to get sick and even die from listeria in raw milk. Well, the person who was the caretaker filed a sworn declaration under penalty of perjury in the Pennsylvania court saying that was completely false, that the person who died was someone she was taking care of, that person never drank raw milk, and said she couldn't have got, and she said she had 4th stage cancer, went in and their cancer treatment didn't work, and she died from cancer in the hospital. Well, we've not only found that out, we were able to find out a semi-secret mechanism by which they are coordinating against farms across the country, where they like to sample food and they put in the data into this big database shared throughout the nation. With doctors and health people are doing the same thing. There's really some questions about the privacy issues implicated, some other legal issues implicated, but they've tried to keep this secret. So when they were going in and doing the sampling of all of his products over all these years, what they've been doing is sending it to this this database that takes, anytime anybody gets sick, the specimen is being entered in this database. And so they're trying to match it. Now, of course, if you spend a lot of time matching it, 99.99% of all food illnesses come from the big corporate, big ag food companies. That's why they keep this secret. They don't talk about this database. We're able to find the database that showed that this woman had listeria. It turned out she had listeria almost a year before. It had nothing to do. It had no tie at all to any product. It's like they're originally claiming was, she went to her caretaker and her caretaker was an Amos Miller customer, and that's how she got listeria. It turned out they knew that was a lie all along, because she had got listeria in another state months before that had absolutely nothing to do with Amos Miller's product. So now you have the sworn testimony of the caretaker. Their own database evidence proved they'd been lying this entire time.
I just want to ask you how the judge comes down the way does the judge not get
I'll get
angry?
to that. I'll get to that in a second.
And is there, because people are asking, this is wild, but does it par for the course? What's the explanation for this rebuttal in front of the judge?
They didn't have one. So the next claim they had made was that 2 people had gotten sick from E. coli steak, and that these people had access to Amos Miller products. Now, I was suspicious of this, since this fits a pattern of their false claims in the past, and they were never producing the test results. Well, it turned out they went in and did a search warrant on January 4th. They got the test results back on the E. coli on January 6th. the E. coli results came back negative. That none of Amos Miller's products had any E. coli stuck in them at all. So it couldn't have been Amos Miller's farm that caused the illness. But they hid that until right before the hearing. So they'd been lying to the judge, they'd been lying to the media, they'd been lying to the public that entire time, and they knew they had. So their new claim was that that they had found in just a small sample, they had found an unidentified amount of listeria in certain samples. It turned out those samples came from a third-party farm. It didn't come from Amos Miller's farm. We did our own independent testing to prove that was the case. And that the amount of listeria, the reason why they didn't identify it is because it was too low to actually cause anybody to get sick. And they tried to tie it to somebody in Texas, and the people in Texas denied that there was any connection. So they had no evidence that any product of Amos Miller has ever made anyone sick. And then, in fact, the evidence was the opposite, because of how many customers, how much food he's delivered, that not one of them has ever complained in the history of Amos Miller's farm, proving him to be one of the, if not the safest farmer in the country, definitely in the state of Pennsylvania. How could they claim his food was unfit for human consumption? Their own tests showed there was absolutely nothing wrong with any of the food from Amos Miller's own farm. That the only listeria they had found was from a third-party farmer of food that was being stored at Amos Miller's, and it wasn't even enough to cause anybody to get sick. So they had no basis, basically, whatsoever for the original basis of the injunction. Not only that, over 350 people testified under penalty of perjury, knowing that this could make them targets of the state, that they needed Amos Miller's product, that it was critical to their medical and physical well-being, that it was critical to their religious beliefs and political associations, that they believed it was constitutionally protected activity they were engaged in, that they had been using his products for many years, had known others that had been using it for many years, and it was the best food they'd ever had. And in fact, when they had tried to find substitutes for it, for medical purposes in particular, they'd been unable to. 4 people testified live. We were limited in how many people we were allowed to use, so that we were allowed to use 4 people as exemplars of all those sworn testimony filed into the court. And they testified how their children had benefited medically from from Amos Miller's product. People that had severe forms of autism, that the nature of Amos Miller's products was that the worst consequences of that autism went away. People who had severe various autoimmune and other disorders, that their lives had literally been saved by Amos Miller's products. People who testified that if they didn't have access to it, their lives would be in jeopardy, not just their physical health, or the lives of their loved ones would be in jeopardy, not just their physical well-being. And basically, they begged the judge, please have this food accessible to us. We need it to survive. And so that got to the judge psychologically and emotionally. And I'll get to how he tried to weasel his way out of it. But then the government put up their witnesses first. And it was basically liar, liar, liar. And the first liar, and the thing about these liars is they lied so bad and so dumb that the prosecutor had to keep correcting their lies during their direct examination before I even got up there. So like, no, not supposed to tell that lie. Supposed to tell this lie. You're not supposed to lie over here. You're supposed to lie over there. You know, they would lie about dates. They would lie about times. They would lie about places. They would lie about Amos however they could. 20 plus years these people have been working up there. And if you look at them, they are a walking, talking symbol why you should not eat food the government way, and you should eat food the Amos way. The PDA way of eating food leads to low IQ lard asses. I mean, every one of them. Low IQ lard ass, low IQ lard ass, low IQ lard ass. Living physical proof of why you don't want to eat the PDA basic. Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture wants you to eat plain food the rest of your life. And you're going to end up looking like them, thinking like them, acting like them. You know, being a depressed wine mom with 40 cats when you're 45 years old. So So I'd get up and cross-examine and ask some basic questions. Has anybody throughout the entire history of the state, or has the PDA learned from anybody in any other state that has ever complained? Has any state agency filed a complaint? Has anybody filed a complaint about Amos Miller's food? And they would try to weasel out of it right away. They're like, well, I don't even really know. I only looked at this part. I didn't know about that part. I didn't only looked at and when they're lying right away, trying to weasel, then it just highlights that they know his food is safe. And so that was proven with each one of them. And then the person who had lied in her affidavit about what had happened, and she admitted that she knew things that she had hidden from the affidavit that led to the search warrant. That's called perjury where I'm from. It's called material omission of material facts relevant to the judge to make a decision on a search warrant. And then she admitted that what power she believed she had at the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, that she had the power to stop anybody, that if you didn't have her permission, the government's permission, you didn't have any right to have any food in your fridge, that you couldn't eat food, possess food, make food, do anything else without that. The attorney general had to try to, prosecutor had to try to fix that on redirect. You don't really mean that, do you? No. And she's like, yeah, I do. It's like, no, you're not supposed to say that out loud in court. And then they came up with lard ass note, low IQ number 3, a pity of, one of these public health experts who was so, like that we all got to experience during the pandemic. And there's no one that's politically a hard left pro-government group, but we now know that they just lie all the time. I mean, the leading ones that were advising the president have now written books admitting that they lied, that they made stuff up, that they exaggerated, that they doctored the data, that some stuff just came out of nowhere. And that's who their expert was. She didn't even understand the basic databases she was looking at. She was trying to say things were correlated or had a causative relationship that didn't. So she didn't help a lot. And and she even pretended not to have a bias against raw milk when she made ridiculous claims. She said, all the science agrees that, unpasteurized milk is much more dangerous than pasteurized milk, when the FDA's own studies proved that opposite of that. She was unaware. She wasn't a member of any of the key societies that do risk analysis. She wasn't certified in any of this. She hadn't read any scholarly piece on the subject in 30 years. She just knew what the government propaganda had regurgitated over the years. And so, and then we presented both Sally from the Weston Price Foundation, Sally Morrell. She came up and testified. The judge tried to cut off parts of her testimony. But she is probably the premier person that knows about raw milk and all the studies and everything ever done on raw milk, is herself a raw milk dairy farmer in Maryland, and was explaining all of the data. The judge didn't like some of her studies. Apparently, the judge doesn't like raw milk. He probably never drank it in his life. Doesn't know what the benefit of it is, because he was making little sarcastic comments along the way. And he didn't like her pointing out a study that they had done, a global study that showed that pasteurized milk not only creates all these other health issues that raw milk does not, but that it makes you dumber. The judge really didn't like that. If he wants an example of it, he can go home and look in the mirror. The net effect of drinking just pasteurized milk. So, and then we finished with one of the leading experts in the country on this topic, has testified before legislative hearings, worked at the USDA itself on these issues for more than a decade. And she opined, she had reviewed all the lab testing data, had reviewed all of the data and information that the state had, as well as our testing data concerning Amos Miller. And she concluded that Amos Miller's products presented no real risk of any kind to his customers. That not only was the product not unfit for human consumption, it was particularly fit for human consumption, and she herself would be happy to consume it tomorrow to prove it. And their only cross-examination was to say, well, the government doesn't agree with you, though. In fact, this was their official claim. It's not an expert unless the government agrees with the expert. Okay, whatever. That gives you an idea of the mindset mentality of these people. They had tried to make up claims when they did the raid about where things were stored or located as to the sanitary conditions, though they didn't find a single unsanitary condition, nor did the feds, every time they did a raid. And she was able to rebut that over and over again, right live, say that doesn't mean that doesn't mean this means that, this means this other thing. Like I say, if you saw the truck didn't have a PDA licensed facility that the milk was going into it, you still drink it? I can tell you a lot of Americans would say that's exactly the kind of milk they drink, the one that ain't in the government truck. Government cheese has a certain inference to it, if you have any familiarity with it, and it ain't the desirability kind. It ain't French cheese. By the end of it, they effectively conceded, and the court's order effectively reflects that there is no safety problem at all with Amos Miller's food. It's some of the safest food in the world.
So it's the safety issues that warranted the provisional injunctions, not the issue, but the law is the law, and if you want to change the law, take it up with the legislature.
That became the judge's excuse became, and the government's only argument became the permit argument. And their argument was that you cannot sell raw milk or any raw milk product without a permit. And the judge had come for what he thought was a rhetorical question, but he didn't know the law on raw milk. He said, well, why doesn't Amos Miller just get a permit? So here's the problem. The state of Pennsylvania, the Department of Agriculture, interprets the permit for it as taking away products you can make, not giving you a license to products you can make, taking away products you can make. Be like getting a driver's license that said you can't operate a car. So that's what it was, and the judge had a hard time grasping this. We had to keep going over it over and over and over again.
Well, I mean, so flesh it out. So you get an authorization from the state, and that authorization presumably says, okay, you can sell pasteurized milk, and whatever, implying, suggesting, or outright forbidding selling anything.
It comes with the express prohibition.
No
when
pasteurized,
you apply
no
for the raw
unpasteurized
milk permit, you agree you will never make almost all raw milk products. You will only make fluid raw milk and certain limited hard cheeses. That's it. You can't make all the raw milk butter, all the raw milk cream, all the other key raw milk products that are 80 to 90% of what Amos Miller's members need.
So, but is that to say the outcome then in Pennsylvania is you're not going to be able to get raw milk products because you can't do it without the permit, and by getting the permit, it precludes you from selling a number of raw milk products?
Exactly. Almost all, pretty much everything that people want. So other than fluid raw milk itself, that's it. Everything else is banned. So and I was like, Judge, I've never seen a permit that's all about prohibition. And I was like, and now you can look up the law and it's not there. So the judge was in a bind of they failed to prove their entire case. We did prove our case that if you evaluated medical, physical need of people, if you valued who was going to be harmed, where the weight of the injuries were, they were all for dissolving the injunction, not continuing the injunction. But I knew where the judge was likely going to go, because the judge, whenever you get one of these judges that starts off telling you, I'm just here to follow the law. I'm just here to follow the law, not to follow politics. Well, it ain't the law that we learn in law school. They don't mean the law in the statute books. They don't mean the law in the constitutions. They don't mean the common law of judicial precedents. They mean the same law John Cougar Mellencamp sings about when he says he fought the law and the law won. They mean power. They mean the power is against you. I can't rule for you. Power is against you. They call it the law because they get it confused. Because if you're a trial state court judge, like the one we'll be discussing in Atlanta, Georgia, usually you get in with minimal opposition, and usually you have no opposition for your reelection. How do you, if you're an elected judge? Similar somewhat for appointed judges. And the only way you lose power is if you offend the law, if you offend powerful people and powerful institutions, such as the government, repeat actors before you. So you start to confuse the law that's on the books, the law that's in our constitutions, the law that's in our court cases. You start to think that that's not the law that keeps you employed, the law that got you employed, the law that writes your checks is power, is government institutions. Because the law in Pennsylvania only talks about being allowed to destroy food that's a menace to public society. And why would you have any different standard for enjoining food than destroying food? That doesn't make any sense. Second problem is The injunction on milk, talking about sale, says that that can only occur for sales within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The permit is only required for sales within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. 95% of Amos Miller's raw milk distribution is outside the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So, and the state's only response to this was, well, Judge, the FDA is not enforcing it. I'll give you the backstory there. So it's not the PDA's job to replace the FDA. The PDA now claims it's the Department of Agriculture for Minnesota, Michigan, Tennessee, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, the entire world. That's how power mad this agency is. So a correct ruling, even if the court was going to interpret that it had the power to enjoin sale, was to sale within the Commonwealth. The other argument I made was the only thing that should be prohibited, if the court was even inclined to do so, is what can be permitted in the first place. How do you prohibit things that a permit can't solve? How do you prohibit 80 to 90% of the milk products from being made? And by the way, you won't find that anywhere in the statute. And they admit they couldn't point anywhere in the statute to their interpretation of their power to permit raw milk to prohibit 90% of raw milk products from being available to anyone now in the world, according to their global interpretation of their power. So, but you have a sense of what the courtroom was like, in that how Pennsylvania courts institutionally operate, in that they prefer star chamber secrecy type proceedings to publicly viewed proceedings. And anybody who had the opportunity to watch the hearing, they came out telling me that, well, you're obviously going to win, right? I mean, it was a no contest, right? Someone cheering for the state would have been throwing in the white flag about halfway through the hearing. But I knew a little bit otherwise, because not only does Pennsylvania courts not allow you to broadcast, live stream, or even record by video or audio means trials and proceedings, they interpret their power to threaten you with jail if you try to take notes. If you were one of the few people who are lucky enough to get into the courtroom, you would, probably close to 500, 600, maybe 1,000, however many people were there. The whole courthouse and everything around the courthouse was lined up with hours in advance. People are out there. I met a lot of great folks out there, and credit to them for coming out. There was a huge crowd right outside the courtroom trying to listen in, trying to hear in.
Well, there was a live stream running. I'm sure anyone who does it. There was a live stream running where there were people coming out and with a bullhorn explaining their situation and what they needed, why they needed it, and why they supported Amos
Yes.
Miller.
And so it was all over the place. But so some people got in, and the few people that got in were told by bailiffs with guns that if they kept notes and took them with them, they could go to jail. By the way, this too is nowhere in the Pennsylvania rules. And the same judge that had been lied to now repeatedly by the state of Pennsylvania, by their officials right there in front of him in the courtroom, was more concerned with whether or not people were taking notes and scolding the audience repeatedly to be, you better not do anything or you'll be going to, behind here.
Robert,
he had an authoritarian streak to him, but he was a misdirected authoritarian streak. If you wanted respect for the court, then hold the government agents lying to you accountable, which he completely failed to do, rather than lecturing Amish people and people there in the courtroom, the very few people allowed to get in, because your courthouse, the Pennsylvania courts, have these backwards star chamber-like views. And I see why they want to keep proceedings secret in Pennsylvania. If the whole world had seen this proceeding, they would have said this is absolutely ridiculous that there's any injunction issued against Amos Miller, that ordinary people are being prohibited from eating the food that they choose from a farmer who has one of the best safety records for food anywhere in the nation, for food they medically needed. You had mothers begging for the food for their children's safety.
Well, that
because
was
they were unable to find a replacement product, and they'd been trying for months.
That was one of my questions. Is, do you think the judge, I'm a open-minded individual, and now I know a lot better than I did a little while ago, but a judge who's going to hear these testimonials might just be inclined to write them off as call them like anti-government extremists. I mean, I'm
Well,
not
and
saying
that's
it to
why
be
we
funny.
had 4 examples of ordinary people in there. These were smart people. These were people that were clearly telling the truth, unlike all the state's witnesses. They were honest and sincere, and the judge was impacted by them because he was kind of complaining by their impact. Well, it's not up to me to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, that's what judicial discretion, called equitable discretion, is, Judge. So there's a thing called the Constitution. When he took an oath, it wasn't to the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. It was to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Pennsylvania. We had asserted many constitutional violations by their interpretation. And they were adding to those with their new claim that they could enforce this across the country. Now you had Supremacy Clause violations, Commerce Clause violations, Privileges and Immunities Clause violations, the Right to Travel Clause violations. Because, by the way, that's why the FDA doesn't enforce the raw milk provisions. You see, some years ago, the FDA came up with their nonsense about raw milk based on an unscientific perspective. It was about as scientific as all their COVID lockdown orders. And so they were sued by a bunch of ordinary folks who said, one, you violated the APA in coming up with this rule. But not only that, you're violating our constitutional rights. Our right to travel, our Privileges and Immunities Clause protection, and our substantive due process right to traditional foods purchased directly from the farmer, which is one of the oldest traditions in all of American history, and one that Thomas Jefferson said needed to be constitutionally protected. He said, if the government's picking your diet, then it'll do as much damage to your soul as any tyranny ever could. And so in that instance, what did the FDA do? The FDA realized they might lose in front of the judge. So they made a statement. They said, Judge, we're never going to enforce this rule. So you can dismiss it on standing grounds. There's no injury left, Judge. So please don't rule against us. And the PDA, unhappy with that, is trying to now replace the FDA as in terms of what they're trying to do, because they're now going to use this to say if milk goes anywhere through the state of Pennsylvania, they can now prohibit it under threat of criminal punishment.
Well, I mean, that is another question that I had. The first, just before I forget, journalists were allowed in, but they were not allowed to, let alone live tweet. They weren't allowed taking notes.
That's I heard the bailiff myself tell them, no taking notes. You can't if you do take any notes, and you can't take any notes with you, and you can go to jail if you do. There were several people that were there that later wrote to me saying that seemed to be a violation of their constitutional rights, and I agree with them. Something else we're going to challenge these rules in Pennsylvania. It's only been challenged once before, and a federal court ruled that these rules violate constitutional rights to open access to the courts and freedom of the press and the like. So we'll see what happens, but it's clear Pennsylvania is used to doing things in the dark, used to doing things in a way that's not the lawful way. It's ironic because Pennsylvania is a state that really birthed a lot of American liberty. The Pennsylvania Declaration of Rights is broader and more robust than our own Bill of Rights. And a lot of our own Bill of Rights derives from that. In particular, it's ironic for the Amish, because the reason why the Amish settled in Pennsylvania is that the Quaker founders of the state promised them protection for their religious lifestyle, which critically includes food and farming as part of that lifestyle. It's not just political expression, it's religious expression. So what the judge did is the judge pulled back on about 90%. So the judge didn't enjoin anything but raw milk. The judge didn't enjoin making raw milk, producing raw milk, or distributing raw milk. He only enjoined selling raw milk. He also made clear it didn't apply to non-commercial use or personal use. He exempted that. And then he went out of his way, which you rarely see in an order, and it tells you the net effect of the hearing, to say that he said nothing in this order should be interpreted as in any way second-guessing the sincerity of the good faith sincerity of all the people who have said that Amos Miller's products are critical for their health. So he clearly was moved by that testimony. He just decided that's a legislative issue rather than a judicial issue. The problem is there's nothing in the law that gives them this power in the first place.
No, so get the likes of I don't know if Massey what he has to do with Pennsylvania, but get the state legislature to clarify what it doesn't include.
And the legislature is asleep at the wheel. Now, my view is they kind of already have. You can look up the raw milk statute. It says if you want to sell within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Even in the injunction statute, it says you may seek an injunction for the sale of raw milk products within the state of Pennsylvania. And there's obvious reasons for that. Supremacy clause. There's obvious preemption by all the FDA rules. It's not their prerogative. Imagine if each state started trying to govern what other people's residents were doing just because something once traveled through their state. That would be a disaster of food policy management in the country. So there's no consistent commerce clause, supremacy clause, and that doesn't even get into the rights and immunities and the right to travel, nor does it get into all of the issues that we raised, none of which the court addressed. The court didn't address our statutory interpretation arguments, didn't address the injunction. For example, he's actually required to do this in Pennsylvania. He's required to go through and say why this injunction won't substantially harm anyone. Well, there's a reason he didn't go through that, because the only people who would be harmed are the people that would be harmed by the injunction, not harmed by the denial of the injunction. And so you're not supposed to issue an injunction in Pennsylvania if that's the case, if there's substantial harm to other interested parties. You're not supposed to issue an injunction if the balance of the public interest isn't in favor of it. So this is a judge who just didn't want to take on the state of Pennsylvania. I mean, he even held them afterwards, kicked everybody out of the courtroom, and tried to get them to come to a different position. He's like, can't you come up to something else that allows these people to get what they need, some sort of balanced solution? And I kept telling him, Judge, they're not going to do diddly unless you revoke and dissolve that injunction. And that's exactly what they said. No, he must bow, he must bow, he must bow. We are the PDA. We are all authority. Pope Redding, the Secretary of Agriculture there, and the reason why I call him the Pope is not, some people thought I was being anti-Catholic or something. It's like nothing anti-Catholic at all. This guy's a pretender Pope. That you are not allowed to eat food until Pope Redding gives it as his blessing. Until he gives you the blessing, then you're not allowed to eat it in Pennsylvania. So, there's a guy apparently has connections to dairy farms himself. So is he able to use the PDA to go after his competition? It sure kind of seems that way. I mean, it's obvious that Pennsylvania is one big cesspool of corruption. And so we will be filing a challenge. I mean, we're glad the judge recognized there's no public health risk of Amos Miller's products. We're glad he recognized the sincerity of that. The best testimony before him was that not only is Amos Miller's products not dangerous, they're necessary. They are great health and benefit to people. We're glad he recognized that he tried to get the state to back off its position. So, I don't have anything against the judge. I disagree with the ruling because I don't believe the statutes give him that authority. I don't believe that even if it tried, it could constitutionally confer such authority upon them. And this violates people's First Amendment, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth Amendment rights, including in certain contexts, Amos Miller, Eighth Amendment against excessive fines, rights to be able to choose what goes into their own body. If you can't buy food directly from a farmer that you trust, that food you have every reason to trust, that you medically need, that is part of your religious belief structure, that is part of your political, associative, and expressive activities, then your core constitutional rights are being taken away from you at its very foundation. Because if the government controls your whole food supply, they control you. Once they own your body, they own you. What does political speech matter if you can't feed your family? Well, what does religious affiliation and expression matter if you can't feed your family? All those other rights are derivative of the first. So so we're going to be challenging that. We'll be filing a motion to stay the part of the order that affects people outside the state of Pennsylvania. We'll focus on that initially. We'll be appealing the entire order. We're also filing a challenge to the unlawful destruction order that ordered a bunch of food destroyed. I mean, get this, 80% of the food they ordered destroyed, their own test proved had no problems whatsoever, was completely safe. What in the world are they doing? They're ordering food destroyed they didn't even properly tag and didn't have authority to search in the first place. So, and the destruction orders and law is crystal clear. It says you can only do it if you find it is unfit for human consumption, can't be made fit for human consumption, and has no animal or beneficial use. They didn't even try to meet any of those 4 standards. Their new interpretation was, we're going to call it misbranded if you have food in your possession that we haven't given you permission for. That's absurd. There's no legal basis for that. So we're going to be filing that in a court of common pleas. We're also going to be filing a civil rights class action on behalf of the members of Amos Miller's Organic Farm, some of whom had food that was already theirs, that was sitting there, that's now being ordered destroyed, but also people who are now denied and deprived all of their constitutional rights under both the Pennsylvania and federal Constitution by the actions of the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. The Constitution of Pennsylvania and the U.S. Constitution governs their behavior. So that civil rights complaint is coming to establish food freedom as a civil right and civil liberty in America. The Amos Miller is able to give stuff away, so that's raw milk related. Non-commercial use is fine. But what he's but he has a lot of other food available other than raw milk products. So that hopefully will keep him afloat. There are people that are continuing to donate to his defense fund. That almost all that money goes directly to him. And I've established and we've beefed up Free America Law Center will be a one-stop shop location for everything about the Amos Miller case. All the legal pleadings, all the information, public information, other information about his case, so that if you have anybody and somebody who asks about it, you can point them there. On top of that, what we're going to be doing is we're going to have a special merch just to fundraise at Free America Law Center to cover the legal fees side of this. Because obviously it's going to be a very expensive case that we're already doing on an extremely discounted basis, and that we'll continue to do whether we get the money or we don't, to be honest. But obviously helps the more resources we have to be able to mount the best defense for him. So, I had a great dinner at Amos Miller's. I guess PDA might call it an illegal dinner. But, again, best food I've ever had, I got from Amos Miller. And I've eaten at the greatest restaurants in the world. I mean, quite literally, the 3 Michelin-starred restaurants all around the world. The Fat Duck, Joe Rubichon, Guy Savoy. I've had the 9th-ranked Kobe steak in Tokyo. I've had the privileges of that part of my life. And the best food I've ever eaten is at Amos Miller's table. And all the efforts to what they've really done is they've made life hard and difficult for some of his members for a certain time period. Hopefully we'll be able to find other places that they can get that. Other people will help them in that regard. But some of them, their health will be just put in jeopardy by this judge's action, and I guess he better hope no great sad consequence comes about from his unwillingness to take on the state. But it's typical of a lot of judges that they won't confront the government. They won't hold the government to account. I don't think he was a corrupt judge or anything like that. I think that just wasn't willing to hold the state to account. And he kept on with the laws, like the law's on my side, Judge. The law doesn't give them this power that they're claiming. The law requires a different standard than the one they're seeking. And equitable jurisdiction is very broad. And one of the issues on appeal is going to be did the court misunderstand its own power? Court's equitable jurisdiction is broad. The idea that you have to do whatever the state demands you do is not what the law of equitable jurisdiction has ever been. Thanks to all the experts that came in, thanks to Sally from the Weston A. Price Foundation that came in, like they assumed that we had been paying all these people, all these 300 plus people that volunteered to testify, 4 of whom testified, 2 of whom testified live in the courtroom, 2 of whom, because for health reasons, testified remotely. That was one of their, they quit asking it after the first witness. They're like, how did you get here? Who paid you to get here? I paid to get here. It's that important to me and my family. So the prosecutor, everybody was like, man, she kind of looks like a little demon up there. Little wouldn't be the right word, but the kind of a weird golem-like personality. But that's the government in general. I mean, they had like a dozen people there. I mean, the judge commented on it. He's like, do you need all of these people? I mean, they're all stacked in there that just to try to crush little Amos Miller. But Amos ain't going anywhere. I think that people will be able to keep him afloat. There's a lot of great products he still has that you can buy. There's some other people who are going to help sell their products through him, like health products, soap, things like that, in the Amish community. So you can get those products through him that will help him, and you can continue to support him at the Give Send Go that's set up for him. Most of that money goes to him, and then you can stay on top of it at the Free America Law Center. We got Miller's Milk with me with a little milk mustache. We got all kinds of T-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies. We got I got some cigar stuff and some bourbon stuff that will be promoted. All of that's going to go solely to help fund Amos Miller's case and related cases. Right now, it'll be going to Amos Miller's case because, to really do the government's going to spend $1 million plus coming after him. The legal defenses that we will mount will be over $1 million. We'll likely, recover 10 cents on the dollar, 20 cents on the dollar. But that helps me not be broke myself while all this is going on. So appreciate that. And of course, the people that are coming out to the Vegas dinner in April, and we might be doing something special come summer up there in Lancaster County that we'll be announcing as a special dinner event, fundraiser event too. But we'll find ways to keep Amos afloat. He was of good spirits. He's like, you just got to be patient. He's always shocked at how people lie. The Amish are just that way. Like they act honestly. They expect others to act honestly. They don't understand people who lie. They not only don't anticipate it, they almost can't process it. And as he was watching one witness after the other lie about him and lie about him and lie about him right on the stand, he's like, how do these people do this? It just literally baffles him. And it's frustrating. The most frustrating thing for him is that he can't get food. He's just a farmer. He doesn't want to be a lawyer. He doesn't want to be in court. He doesn't want to be on the news. He's just a farmer who loves the farm. His father farmed. His grandfather farmed. His great-grandfather farmed. That's all he wants to do. His wife loves to cook. She loves when people, get the chance to enjoy his farmed food and her exceptional cooking. The little kids are all great. They're all running around. Sweethearts, adorable people. This is just the beginning. And all I will leave people with is this. There's no country song that goes, Jesus may love you, but I don't. And Jesus may forgive you, but I won't. Well, the Amish do forgive, and the Amish will turn the other cheek. But I don't, and I won't. And there will be consequences for all that has happened here.